cell, and we look at all the ingredients inside the cell, and these are the main players of muscle contraction, right? The name of the thick filament is your myosin, and the thin filament is actin. And when they contract, you look at these different bands, these different zones. If I was gonna ask you this one, I hope no one will get a mistake. This should be a freebie. Just know, if you remember two things, the thick and thin filaments do not change shape, they don't shorten at all, number one. And number two, the thin filament is pulled towards the center. So then you can just picture in your head, if you're just given this one, because you're just only going to be given this one. In the past, if you were given a test, and I'll ask you, what happens to H zone so you'll be, these names, the names stay in case it comes out in the test. So that's why you needed to remember the two things. Actin and myosin don't change, they don't shorten, number one, and number two, the myosin is the one that pulls this to the center. So you can answer, what happens to this zone? Well, it decreases. Very easy, right? What happens to this I band? When this gets pulled, it also decreases, right? Okay? And then this is the entire sarcomere. What happens to the entire sarcomere? Shortens. So that should not be, that should be like, you should be happy if that comes out in the test, because you know actin and myosin don't change. And number two, actin just pulls myosin towards the center. Okay? Okay. So now let's go to this part right here. The fact that actin is pulled towards the center by myosin tells us something about the overlapping. So the overlapping means where the actin and the myosin meet. That's called the overlap. They need to overlap, right? There has to be overlap. If there's no overlapping between actin and myosin, remember what I said? Myosin they stay put. Myosin can't bend to reach out, and actin cannot stretch. So there has to be an overlap. So let's look at this side over here. You see, it says overstretched. This one, to me, should be very important. I think this picture, you want to remember when you go to the cardiovascular system. Do you remember that your heart is muscle, right? You've heard of some people with enlarged hearts. So we worry about people with enlarged hearts or people with hypertension that hasn't been controlled. Hypertension is a very, very scary problem, but it's manageable. The problem is some people, they're not very good with taking their medication. So when your muscle stretches way too much, see, look at this one, overstretched. There's no overlap. Can that still contract? What do you think? Yes or no? Look at. No, right? There's no more overlapping, see? So that's the danger. That's why we want to treat people with heart enlargement. That's why it's also good to know proper stretching. It's possible to overstretch something. That's irreparable. You can't repair it, okay? And then this is what happens when you stretch too much. When you stretch too much, can this still contract? But no more, right? Because look at, no more, because look at the actin has been pulled all the way. There's no way to pull it any further. So it's possible that you contract it, and that's exactly how our muscles look like after exercise. That's why it's very important to stretch after, right? When you're done with your exercise regimen, you want to stretch because you want to go back here. Who exercises just to exercise? I'm sure we exercise because, oh, we do? I do.
Sure, everyone does.
Oh, I mean, you exercise because you want to lose weight. You want to achieve something, right? You cannot. If you go home without stretching after your exercise program, your muscles are right here. Okay? So the next day, you're not going to burn as many calories anymore. You have to go back and stretch it, go back here. So that your exercise, you're achieving the maximum calorie burn. At least for girls. That's what we want, right? Okay? So we talked about this one, we talked about this. And now that's just a nice summary also. Look at, don't forget that the acetylcholinesterase breaks down that enzyme. Remember I told you there's no muscle relaxation is a passive process. The contraction part is active, but to relax is passive, and it's promoted by these factors, which you have it in your notes already. Okay, include there the enzyme breakdown of acetylcholine. Okay. Next. So now, these are different neurotransmitters that affect muscle contraction. We don't, but this is good to know. You know the Botox. The reason why we have wrinkles. The reason why you have wrinkles is because your muscles still contract. You smile and your muscles contract. But the skin, remember the elastic fibers are broken, so they can't adapt to the contraction. So now you have the wrinkles. And that's why when they give this one, it blocks the contraction. When it blocks contraction, there will be no wrinkling. Wrinkling is produced by contraction of your muscles. Okay? But I don't ask this one. Here, this is what I want us to now know. Muscle metabolism. This is very important to know. Just, for practical purposes also. The point is, we need ATP. That is the only energy currency of the cell. So for muscle to contract, it must have ATP. So look at letter A here. Letter A is telling me that all muscle cells already have ATP present inside their cells. It is already present, ready to be burned. Did you get that? And when ATP is burned, it becomes ADP. A, T means try, D means die. So remember, ATP looks like this, adenosine and then triphosphate, right? 3 of them. So when we burn this, you break down this bond, you release the energy. That's what powers muscle contraction. So it's no longer ATP, it's now just ADP. And that's the product. You see? When you start exercising or when you start any muscle activity, the ATP now becomes ADP. There's only one problem with ATP. You only have enough ATP to power muscle activity for maybe 15 to 20 seconds only, maybe 30 seconds, less than 1 minute. Okay? So after half a minute, you don't have any more ATP, this is gone. What you have is ADP. Did you get that? So I started my exercise, I only had enough ATP for about 30 seconds. That's, if you're gonna get married in 2 weeks, you need to exercise for more than 30 seconds, right? So what's gonna happen? Look at this one. There is such a compound called creatine phosphate. I'm sure you've heard of creatine shakes. They sell that in the gym. So they sell that, but you don't need it, right? Anything extra protein that we take becomes fat. You just have to work harder to burn the extra protein that you take. So all our cells, no, write down, only muscle cells have creatine creatine phosphate. There is no other cell. Red blood cells don't have it, nerve cells don't have it. Only muscle cells have creatine phosphate. What is ATP again? What is it? Adenosine triphosphate, right? So you see, when you break down the ATP becomes ADP, you need to replenish. So this is gone, you need to replenish the phosphate. You get that from creatine phosphate, you see, which is found where? Inside muscles. It's ready. It's present there. So what will happen is the phosphate from creatine right there will just be transferred to ADP. So you replenish your ATP. Did you see that? Okay. Did you get that, everybody? You just take away this phosphate, right, and transfer it to the ADP. Now you reform your ATP. So this combination ATP and creatine phosphate helps you with muscle activity for about 1 minute, and that's it. Okay, so after 1 minute, you have another problem, gone. No more ATP. Before we proceed, after 1 minute of exercise, let's look at this creatine phosphate, which sometimes gets asked in the test. If only muscle cells contain creatine phosphate, only muscle cells contain creatine phosphate. I hope now it makes sense why sometimes you encounter this in the ER. You have a patient who you suspect MI or heart attack. They will ask you, draw the blood and send it for cardiac enzymes. Okay? So there is an enzyme that takes away the phosphate or facilitates the transferring of this phosphate from creatine phosphate to ADP. So when you take that out, you transfer it here, you reform your ATP. There's an enzyme that facilitates that. The enzyme is called creatine phosphokinase or CPK. Creatine phosphokinase or CPK. So if creatine phosphate is only found in muscle cells, then it makes sense that this enzyme must also be found only inside muscle cells. Does it make sense? Right? Creatine phosphate is only present in muscle cells. Do you find creatine phosphate in skin cell?
No.
Nerve cell?
No.
No, just only muscle. That means this enzyme must only be found only also in muscle. So if you have a heart attack, that means the muscle cell died, right? And if it died, whatever its contents were now will spill into the blood. And so if you draw the blood of your patient and you look for cardiac enzymes, it will be present in the blood. What's that? What does that mean? It means the muscle cell died. And there's different strains of CPK. CPK MM, MB, and BB. Those MM is for heart, MB is for skeletal muscle, and BB is for smooth muscle. See? So that's how they find out. You got that?
They find out
if the enzyme is in the blood, then that means
the muscle died.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right?
Cool.
The cell has been damaged to spill its contents into the blood.
That's a bad day.
It's bad. Okay? Okay, so sometimes I ask that in the test. Sometimes. Okay, so now we're done with 1 minute of exercise. But we want to exercise longer. After 1 minute of exercise, you feel like you're in the zone. You want to keep going, right? Okay, so no more. Now you're back to ADP. Yes, Vanessa.
So, what kind of death would that be for the cell?
What kind of death?
Yeah.
What do you think? That's a good question. What kind of, there's only 2 types of death, right?
The normal or regular? Or
What do you call the normal? Apoptosis. What's the abnormal? So which one is it, you think? Heart attack? Necrosis, very good, right? Right? Good. You didn't mean for your heart to die, you just died. Okay, so now this one, look, do you remember? Now I'm done. No, after 1 minute, I just have ADP. I cannot use that. I need ATP. Where am I going to get ATP? I'm gonna get it from the carbohydrate, from the glycogen. Remember? Muscles have glycogen. Do you remember? Right? So I'm gonna burn, that's why it's letter B. I'll burn the carbohydrate. Remember this, that's why the first 20 minutes of exercise, we are only burning carbs. If you want to burn the fat, you gotta exercise for more than 20 minutes. Because the first 20 minutes, we're only burning the glycogen that's in the muscle. Why? Because it's already present there. Like when you go shopping, if you have cash in your pocket, it doesn't make sense to go to the ATM. You already have cash in there. When you use up all your cash, then that's when you go to ATM. Same thing here. You got that? Okay? So now we go here. And it's called, what we store in muscle is called glycogen. How did you break down the glycogen to produce glucose? What's that process? Glycogenolysis, right? So the muscle glycogen will be broken down. That's called glycogenolysis to release the individual glucose units. And so glucose is a 6-carbon molecule, right? And the first event in glucose breakdown is called glycolysis, breaking it in half. The energy is stored in this chemical bond. So when you break that in half, you release the energy. So you see, look at glycolysis, there's release of energy and you're already getting ATP. But there's still ATP here. See, there's still energy here. You still have energy there. You can still use that. If you don't use this 3-carbon compound is called pyruvic acid. Did you get that? Yes. So glucose was 6 carbon. You break it in half. And breaking it in half, you get the energy there to reform ATP. The product is called pyruvic acid. This pyruvic acid doesn't have to be burned. If you don't burn it, it becomes lactic acid. And it goes into the blood. This is called anaerobic. So when we do anaerobic exercise, when we're not breathing, no oxygen, anaerobic means no oxygen, we end up with pyruvic acid, which becomes lactic acid, which goes to the blood that leads to muscle cramping. So acid creates an acidic condition in the body, which is not good. That's when we feel the fatigue, we're tired, cramping. Okay? Can we burn the pyruvic acid still? There's still energy here. Can we? Yes. We go to letter C. So we can still burn this pyruvic acid. You see? Look at the word pyruvic acid from glycolysis. You see that? But the only way to get energy from the last bonds right here is if you send it to the mitochondria. Can I ask you, is there any other organelle we studied that gives us ATP, powerhouse, energy? No, right? It's only the mitochondria. That's the powerhouse of the cell. And what does the mitochondria need again? Oxygen. Which, remember, muscle cells already have their own oxygen from myoglobin. Look at me. That's why I can tell who's serious and who's not serious when they're in the gym. How do you get oxygen?
Breathing.
From the heart and then The heart will from the lungs, and then how do you get the oxygen from your lungs all the way to your toes?
Heart.
The what? Huh? What?
Heart.
Heart. The what did you say?
Nose.
The nose. What did you say? The blood. That's right. Right. The blood. Chad, the blood, right? The blood vessel, right? From the lungs, the blood vessel must be the one to deliver. Okay, if you're wearing tight clothes, don't you think you're constricting your blood vessels, right? So those who, like my Baba, he's in denial, right? He's size 42, but he still wants to. Have you ever done that? Size 36. And so at the end of the day, even though you didn't do anything, you feel sore, you feel tired. Why? There's not enough blood that's going to your muscles. You see? That's why I can tell. If you really want, endurance, exercise just for a long time, you want to wear loose clothing, not the tight clothing, right? Because if you're wearing the tight clothing, it's gonna constrict the circulation.
Even though like it.
Okay? Like it's okay.
Okay, now I'm like getting really serious
No,
about this
yeah.
in the gym.
So a lot of places they sell like dry fit clothing.
Yeah.
What would you say to that?
They're
That's
okay.
like tight clothing.
They're not really tight. You know what? You know what I mean about tight?
Oh, like
right?
tight jeans, things that
The
constrict
tight,
your, or
tight,
like a
yeah,
dress
yeah.
that's like.
Those clothes now, in fact,
Corset.
they use all the athletes use that, right? That's why we like to watch football because they.
Well, now we know why you like to watch football.
Vanessa,
So what do you think about waist trainers?
what's a waist trainer?
So you know, like
It's a
It's
corset.
like a corset, but for working out, and you tie it around your waist. It's supposed to like take out a lot of sweat from your body as you work out. But so now we're talking.
So we're 50% water.
Right.
So when you wear those things and you sweat, you're gonna lose weight because you're losing water, but you're dehydrated.
So, but them being around your waist tight as they are.
It doesn't really mean anything. Believe me, I tried everything. so this one is just different names, but you got that. You understand this one? So you know why carbohydrate is always the first one to burn, right? Because it's already present in your blood. Now I want to tell you, this is one of the reasons why also exercise is now a prescription for diabetics, right? Because if you're exercising and you're using up all the sugar in your muscles, what do the muscles have to do? They have to replenish their storage. How do they replenish? They grab the sugar that's in the blood. That's how exercise lowers the blood sugar. That's why exercise is good for diabetics. Okay? Can you explain that if I ask you that in the test? You know I don't like just 2 words, right? I want to make sure that you really understand. So you want to really show me that you understand, right? When you're exercising, you're using up the sugar in your muscle. Once you used up the sugar in your muscle, you want to replenish. Therefore, you're going to grab the sugar that's in your blood. What happens to the sugar in your blood? It went down. That's how we help diabetics. Oh, no. That's how exercise helps diabetics. Okay? So look at this one. We have, like I told you, we have enough carbohydrate to burn for about 20 minutes. After 20 minutes, your muscle cells are busy trying to replenish their carbs. In the meantime, you still want to keep going, so that's the only time you're going to burn your fats. You see? But there's look at fatty acids liberated from your adipose tissue. That's the only time it will start getting burnt from your adipose tissue. But how can you burn carbohydrate? Can you burn carbohydrate? Can you burn fats anaerobically? The only way to burn fats is by sending it to the mitochondria, which is aerobic exercise. That's why they have the, what do you call, CrossFit? Is it CrossFit where you go like 5 minutes intense and then 10 minutes just what, right? The whatever you call it, right?
Intervals.
Interval. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to burn the carbs quicker so that you get to that fat right away. Everyone knows that you need to burn the carbs first before you can get into that fat. There's no such thing as, you know, this, when you do this one, it will burn the fats right away. There's no such thing as that. We always have carbohydrates in our skeletal muscle, okay? So again, if you wanna burn the fat, the only way to do that is by aerobic exercise. This is why yoga is so good. You heard of weight loss yoga? It really works. Don't look at me because I don't do weight loss yoga, but it really works. So I want to try that. But it really, really works. It promotes breathing. You see, you need oxygen to burn the fat. And then, if you want to burn your proteins, yes, you can do that too. But the only way to do it is aerobic. Of the three nutrients, your carbs, your proteins, or your fats, only the carbs can be broken down anaerobically. Your proteins and the fats, you need aerobic exercise for that. But you know the danger if we do the fats, right? I told you that already, right? The buildup of ammonia. So you see, breakdown products, you got your ATP. You got your carbon dioxide, which you can just breathe out, water, UTP or sweat, and then you have the heat for thermogenesis. Do you have any question on this slide? Any question on this slide? Now you can educate your friends, right? If they, want to do some exercise, you can advise them. And your advice is an intelligent advice because you know already the metabolism of muscle cells. Okay? So muscle fatigue is mainly because of the buildup of acid, lactic acid, from anaerobic. So that's why if you want to do endurance, like marathon runners, for endurance, you want to make sure you have a good breathing pattern, okay? If there is lack of oxygen, you're going to end up with fatigue. Acid conditions can denature your muscle. Who cooks here? You know that vinegar can be a softener to soften the meat, right? So vinegar is acid, isn't it? And that's exactly what will happen to our own meat. When our own meat, meaning our own muscle, is exposed to acid, it will denature our muscles. And that's why we feel that fatigue. We gotta stop. That's our body telling us there's so much acid going on. So then we have to drink lots of water, right? You drink lots of water when you have muscle fatigue. Why? Because that's the only way you can flush out the acid from your body. Okay? So while you're exercising, you're using up your exercising muscles are actually using up most of the oxygen. Okay? So you know that you need oxygen from head to toe. But when you're exercising, I bet you a lot of your body organs are sacrificing their supply of oxygen just so you can keep on exercising. Which means you're building a debt, right? Like the supply of oxygen that goes to your brain, maybe, to your kidneys, to your other cells, they're sacrificing it so that your muscle, your skeletal muscle cell, can have enough oxygen. But when you're done, you will notice your respiratory rate is still high. Why? Because now it's payback time. You have to pay back, you have to deliver oxygen, normal amount of oxygen to your brain, plus to the rest of your body. That's what you mean by oxygen debt. Now, you can understand why even after a long commercial break, after the football, what do you call it, Powerball? No, Super Bowl. After the Super Bowl, after the Super, did somebody win the Powerball? Like 500 million, isn't it? So after the Super Bowl, long break, and they still interview what do you call the one? The quarterback, right? And they interview him. Did you notice he's still breathing fast, right? That's because he had so much debt, he has to pay that. Okay? That's what we mean by oxygen debt. As far as muscle contraction is concerned, there's actually two types of contraction: isotonic and isometric. Those are the two ways that our muscles contract. Iso means it doesn't change or the same. You know what metric means? Metric, a kilometer, centimeter. What's metric then? Length, right? So if the length of your muscle does not change, then you call that isometric. If the length changes, then it becomes isotonic. That's how I try to remember. If the length does not change, it's isometric. And if it changes, you call it isotonic. Isometric contractions do not accomplish any movement. They didn't move anything. So, like when I'm pushing on this table, no matter how hard I push, look at the length of my muscle, it didn't change, right? So that's isometric. So all our activities is always a combination isometric, isotonic. Like I'm gonna try and lift your arm like this initially, that's isometric. And then when I finally lift it, look at my muscles, short, and that's isotonic, right? Look at me, look at me. This is isometric, see, isometric first, and then now isotonic. That, like the weightlifters, right? However, in the test, if I ask you, you have to choose between the two. Do not write both. For example, I'll say lifting your purse like this. Lifting your purse going to the car. So what's this one? Metric. Isometric, right? Because I didn't change the length. Okay? Or this one. Pushing your hands against each other. Isometric, right? See, it didn't change. See? How about just plain walking? Isotonic, because it keeps changing. So remember, when there's an actual movement, that's isotonic. When you didn't move anything, that's isometric. Okay? Okay. So now we go to the types of muscle fibers. There's what you call the oxidative and then glycolytic. I prefer the red and the white. It's easier for students to know or to understand. It's very easy to know this one too. Oxidative means oxidation, means you have lots of mitochondria, right? Glycolytic means you have lots of glycogen. So of the two, which one do you use for aerobic exercise? The oxidative or glycolytic? Yes, very easy, right? But then students usually get confused with this one, so I use this one. Red or white. Red meat, dark meat. You notice the chicken, they have the red meat and then the white meat, right? So if it's red, it has more blood, right? And if it has more blood, more way for oxygen to get there. So I think the red is more aerobic, lots of mitochondria, more bloody. That means if they have a good blood supply, they don't need as many glycogen that's stored in their muscle, right? Because they always have good blood supply. It's the white meat that have to make sure they have lots of glycogen because they don't have good blood supply. So, I'm thinking the muscles that I use more often will be what? Red or white?
Red.
Yes, very good. Does it make sense? It will be more red than white, the muscles that I use more often, right? Like my leg muscles, like the chicken. You notice their legs are dark and their chest is white. They're walking all the time, right? So the ones that you use more often will be red than white. This one will have more glycogen, okay, compared to that one. This one, more blood vessels than this one.
Red's tastier more.
Bread is tastier than white, really?
Dark meat. Chicken.
I like that too. Okay. So this one is just comparing. I just feel that it's harder for students to know this. By the way, the red meat and the dark meat is genetically determined. That's why not all of us are gifted runners, right? Not all of us are bodybuilders. It's genetically determined. But you can sprout new blood vessels. If you just train yourselves, you can sprout new blood vessels. And you can change your white to red. Okay? Okay. So now let's go. Let's go to the difference to the other muscles. So everything we studied about muscle physiology, the actin myosin, the muscle contraction process, everything applies to both cardiac, to all of them, to skeletal, to cardiac, and smooth muscle. Okay? And you're going to know more about cardiac muscle when you get to Bio 242. But for now, what do you need to know about cardiac muscle? They're also striated, remember, under the microscope, but they have the intercalated disc. The intercalated disc has lots of gap junctions. So that's how they synapse and communicate with the next cell for the pacemaker, so that the heart, when it contracts, it's like it's one big muscle cell, okay? So that's the difference. How about the excitation, contraction, coupling? Does that happen in muscle? Yes, because it's muscle. So even the heart needs to be stimulated before it contracts, even though it's called autorhythmic. It stimulates its own. It doesn't rely on our brain. It has its own internal wiring, own internal nervous system. But still, it has to be excited. Okay? And we're gonna know more about the heart when you go to Bio 242. Okay? You should know where you find it, right? You should know that it is involuntary. You know what involuntary means? What does that mean? Yes, you can't control it voluntarily. You can't tell your heart, good night, dear heart, I'll see you tomorrow. You can't do that, right?
You'd be dead.
You'll be dead, that's right, yeah.
So the autorhythmic is equivalent to the ACH?
No, it beats on its own, autorhythmic. Yeah, so it has its own nervous system, that's right.
So, okay.
It has its own set of nerves that release ACH. You're gonna see that when you go to Bio 242. You remember this from your histology? Okay. There's a few more things about the heart, but we don't want to overwhelm it. That's reserved for next quarter. Now we go to smooth muscle. Where do you find smooth muscle? You should know. Why is it called smooth? Because you don't see striations under the microscope. Does it also contract? Sliding film? Everything we studied applies here, except that with smooth muscle, the actin and the myosin, they're not arranged regularly. They're just randomly spread. And you notice that the actin, it binds to the cell membrane of smooth muscle, to proteins called dense bodies right there. These red globules are dense bodies. So when the myosin pulls the actin is pulling on the cell membrane. They say it looks like when you're trying to dry a piece of towel like this, like wringing the towel. That's how smooth muscle starts contracting in a wringing manner, which is very efficient if you think about where you find smooth muscle. Where do you find smooth muscle? Small intestines. How about when you pee-pee? Isn't that smooth muscle too? When you pee-pee, don't you want to empty all of your bladder contents, right? And so that's why, look at, it's very efficient if it contracts that way and not that way, okay? There's one thing very important that I want you to remember about smooth muscle, plasticity. Of all of the 3 types of muscle, smooth muscle is the only one that has the ability to stretch. And when it stretches, it assumes that new resting face. That's amazing. And that's a blessing. I'm sure I'm not the only one who tried to hold my pee-pee because the rest area was stinky. Have you done that? Mm-hmm. But when you held your pee-pee, did you know that your kidney keeps on squirting pee-pee into the bladder? Every time, feel your heartbeat. Is it 80 beats a minute? Then it's 80 times a minute that there's trickling of pee-pee into your bladder. 80 times. Each time the heart beats, there's a trickling of pee-pee. So it keeps on filling. But the stinky bathroom, you get back in the car, you go drive another 50 miles. So that's why this is a blessing, right? It's able to stretch and then assume that new resting face to a certain extent. We can't go over, right? Remember that girl who died? Hold your wee for a week. She joined that. You remember that? Was that?
No.
That's right.
In San Francisco, I think there was a radio game where you hold your pee-pee. The wee just came out, it's this brand new, and she gave birth and she wanted to lose weight, and so she joined that game, right? Whoever they made them drink the bottled water every 15 minutes.
Oh, she died.
Who's able to hold the pee-pee the longest wins. She won. She held her pee-pee, but they were even laughing. They said, "Oh, you look like you're pregnant again." Can you imagine? She won, but what happened 12 hours later? She died. Yep. Her husband won $5 million. But
From the settlement or from the
settlement,
price?
but the baby is now without a mom. Okay, and another thing about smooth muscle, I think, which is a blessing, is of all the 3 types of muscle, skeletal, cardiac, or smooth, smooth muscle has stem cells. They're called pericytes. They have stem cells that's able to replace injured smooth muscle cell. Isn't that a blessing? I think that's why surgeons, when they cut, they're very careful to cut through the skin, through skeletal muscle, but then when they get into the organs, they just chop, chop. Don't they do that? Why? Because they know that there's stem cells in smooth muscle. There's also stem cells in skeletal muscle. They're called satellite cells. But there's a big debate because there's not enough satellite cells to repair or replenish. If it's a massive skeletal muscle damage, there's not enough of them. So you don't even read that in some books anymore, the word satellite cells. But you still read this in A&P books. Okay? Okay? See, satellite cells for skeletal muscle, not too common anymore. I won't ask that. This one maybe I'll ask. Okay? So this one just talks about how muscle is formed from your mesoderm, which I will not ask. The next, oh, why did I turn off the next 2 chapters is on muscles, the different muscles of the body. And that one I want you to know, what page is that? Who has the textbook? Because I turned off the PowerPoint. What's the textbook? Oh. So when you go to right here on figure 11.3 and 11.3. Figure 11.3, page 337 and 338. These muscles of the human body, you must know. So the next worksheet we're going to work on is combination muscles plus movements, again, joint movements. You know when muscles contract, they're the ones that promote the flexion, extension, etc., etc. So we're going to revisit joint movements, but we're going to add the different muscles that promote those joint movements. Okay?
Everyone.
See you next week.